In the last section, we put together some rudimentary authentication, this sign in with email and password, but we still don't really know what it means to be signed in, right? We are also not handling the case in which a user enters an incorrect email or password. So we still have a little bit to go with this whole sign in with email and password business right here. When we added a call to sign in with email and password and then actually execute it, this statement right here returns a promise. Remember that a promise in JavaScript is a construct for handling some amount of asynchronous code. When we authenticate our user, it makes an actual request to the Firebase server, and that takes some amount of time to actually make that request. To get notified of when that request is complete, we can make use of that promise. Okay, so we can make use of the promise that is returned by this statement right here. So remember the methodology or the flow that we're going to use. We're going to say if a user's sign-in attempt fails, then we want to try to create an account instead. So to handle that with a promise, we can remove the semicolon on the end of this line, which I just did, and then I'll add on a .catch case. This .catch statement right here says if this request fails, so if we get an error when we try to sign our user in, then we should enter this function, this fat arrow function that I just passed to the catch statement. Then inside of this statement right here, inside of this catch case, we will start going down the error chain. So we'll say, okay, if we're in this fat arrow function, they must have failed to sign in. That means we need to then attempt to create that user an account. So inside of this catch case right here, we will attempt to make the user an account with the same email and password that they just entered. So to do so, we'll use another method on this firebase.auth object. So we'll say firebase.auth, and then this time around, it will be create user with email and password. And we'll pass in both the email and the password. So now we're implementing the right-hand side of this chain up to this step right here. We attempted to sign the user in. If the request fails, we then attempt to create an account for them. Now we're going to go further down the right-hand side and say, okay, we just attempted to create you an account, and if that fails, then we want to enter the final fail case. We want to say, finally, okay, you know what, this really went downhill. We need to show an error on the screen. So this statement right here, our create user with email and password, also returns a promise because it is also an asynchronous method. So I'm going to chain on another .catch and pass in a fat arrow function. And inside of here, inside of this nested .catch is where we will finally show an error to the user. So we need to somehow get an error message on the screen. So how might we do that? How would we get our component to re-render and show an error message on the screen once we're inside this catch case right here? Remember how we always re-render our components. We always re-render components by using component level state. So we will introduce a new property on our state object called something like, error. And if a user both fails to sign in and create a new user with email and password, then we'll show an error message basically saying, hey, everything went wrong here. Like, you did something really wrong. So let's give this a shot. Whenever we use state, we have to default our new property. So I will default error to be a new string. And then if a user finally gets into this catch case down here where they both failed to sign in and sign up, then we will update our state and update the error message. So we'll say this.setState error is authentication failed. Just a very generic, hey, something really went wrong here. You entered some bad information. So now whenever the user really screws up or really fails their authentication, we will have a piece of state called this.state.error. So the last thing that we need to do is make sure that we show that error message inside of our render method somewhere. I'm going to find my last card section. So here's the button component right here and the card section with it. And outside of that card section, so I'm outside of it, I'm going to add in a new text tag to show the user that error message. So inside the text tag, I'll say this.state.error. Now the key here is that when the component first boots up, this.state.error is going to be an empty string. So by default, the user does not see an error message. But then when the user successfully logs in, everything is happy and fine and everything's going just a-okay. Or wait, no, reverse that. When the user attempts to log in and something goes wrong, this.state.error will be populated, there will be an error message in here, and the text tag will actually show up to the user. Note that we are not importing the text tag right now, so I'm going to scroll back up to the top to our React Native import, and I'm also going to import the text tag. And it looks like we removed that React Native import altogether, so I'll import it back in, and I'll pull out the text tag from React Native like so. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of styling to this text tag right here, just to make it nice and big and red, and really just shove it right in our user's face to let them know, hey, something really went wrong with authentication. So to add in a style, we're going to do the same thing we always do. We will add in a new styles object at the bottom, and I will give this a property of error text style. And then we'll tell it, hey, you know what, you need to be really big, so we'll give it a font size of 20. We will use the align self property to center the text on the screen, and then we'll set the color to red, so it's nice, big, and bright red. Then finally, we will apply this text style to the text tag that we just added. So here's the text tag. I'm going to apply a style of styles.error text style. All right, so again, because we're only using one property off the styles object right now, I'm not going to use destructuring. If it ends up that we need more properties off the styles object, then maybe we'll do some destructuring just to clean up our code. So in this section, we have implemented the first portion of our flow, like this entire right-hand side fail case. So if the user attempts to sign in with an email and password that does not exist, or if they attempt to sign in with an email and password that an email that does exist but the incorrect password, they will go down the full right-hand side and we will eventually show them an error message down here. So let's continue the next section and test out this flow.